The day the world watched me lose everything, they thought the story was about money. They were wrong. Camera flashes exploded like lightning across the courthouse steps, each burst of white light freezing another piece of my failure for tomorrow's headlines. I stood there in a charcoal suit that suddenly felt like a costume from a life that no longer belonged to me. Reporters crowded behind the barricades. Microphones stretched toward me. Voices overlapped until they became a single roar. 5 years earlier, those same people had called me a visionary. 3 years earlier, they had called me the most powerful businessman in New York. Today, they called me a cautionary tale. The wind cut between the skyscrapers and tugged at my jacket as I stared at the courthouse doors behind me. Blackwell Holdings was gone. The board had voted me out. My fortune had evaporated one legal battle at a time. Every company I had spent 15 years building now belonged to people who had once smiled across conference tables and called me friend. A reporter pushed closer than the others. Her voice carried over the chaos. "Mr. Blackwell, do you regret choosing her over the merger?" Another voice followed immediately. "Was she worth losing billions?" The crowd fell strangely quiet. I looked past them, past the cameras, past the city skyline that had once felt like my kingdom. For a second, I saw her face instead. Olivia Carter, the woman who never cared about private jets. The woman who never asked how much money I had. The woman who could walk into a room full of powerful people and somehow make all of them seem small. My throat tightened. It still happened whenever I thought about her. Even after everything. Especially after everything. "Yes," I said. Just one word. The silence that followed was louder than any question. Then the crowd erupted. More shouting. More cameras. More speculation. But I barely heard any of it. Because in my mind, I wasn't standing outside a courthouse. I was standing in a small art classroom in Brooklyn. I could smell paint. I could hear children laughing. I could see sunlight pouring through old windows. And I could see the moment my entire life changed. People love stories about powerful men falling. They imagine greed, pride, ambition. They imagine secret deals and reckless decisions. The truth is much simpler. I lost everything because I fell in love with a woman who reminded me that I was human. Back then, I thought power could solve every problem. I thought success meant winning every negotiation, owning every room, controlling every outcome. I didn't know that some victories come disguised as losses. I didn't know that the most expensive thing in the world isn't a company or a mansion or a stock portfolio. It's the person you can't replace. Another reporter shouted my name. Another camera flashed. I finally looked up. The gray clouds hanging over Manhattan promised rain. Funny. The beginning of my downfall had started on a beautiful spring morning, and it had started with a woman who smiled at me like I was nobody special. Looking back now, that should have been my first warning. Or maybe it was my first miracle. I used to believe mornings belonged to people with ordinary lives. People who packed lunches, complained about traffic, and worried about things that could be fixed before dinner. 3 years before I stood outside that courthouse, my mornings began on the 52nd floor of Blackwell Tower overlooking Manhattan. The city stretched beneath my office windows like a machine I had spent half my life trying to master. Every minute was scheduled. Every conversation had a purpose. Every decision carried a dollar sign attached to it. At 35 years old, I had become exactly the man I promised myself I would be. Successful, respected, untouchable. At least that was what everyone told me. The truth felt different. My assistant placed a folder on my desk just after 8 o'clock. 3 acquisitions, 2 investor meetings, a private dinner with a senator. I glanced at the schedule and felt nothing. No excitement, no satisfaction. Just another day moving numbers across screens, while people congratulated me for winning a game I was no longer sure I wanted to play. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a reminder I had almost forgotten. Children's Arts Foundation, Brooklyn Community Center. 1 hour. I had agreed to attend weeks earlier because one of our corporate partners wanted publicity photos for a charitable initiative. Normally, I would have sent someone else. That morning, for reasons I still cannot explain, I decided to go myself. Brooklyn looked different from the neighborhoods where I usually spent my time. Less polished, more alive. Street vendors lined the sidewalks. Parents pushed strollers. Kids laughed from playgrounds squeezed between brick apartment buildings. When my driver stopped outside the community center, I checked my watch twice before stepping out. I planned to stay 15 minutes, 20 at most. Inside, the building smelled faintly of paint, construction paper, and old books. Children's artwork covered the walls. Bright colors, crooked shapes, honest creativity untouched by market research or investor expectations. A volunteer greeted me and pointed toward a classroom at the end of the hallway. The noise hit me first. Laughter, excited voices, the sound of people enjoying themselves without trying to impress anyone. Then I saw her. Olivia Carter stood near a table covered with paintbrushes and paper. Sunlight streamed through the windows behind her, catching strands of blonde hair pulled loosely behind her shoulders. She wore jeans with paint marks near one knee and a simple blue sweater. Nothing about her looked planned or calculated. She was helping a little girl mix colors while listening to a story that only made sense to a 7-year-old. The child laughed. Olivia laughed with her. Not politely, not professionally, genuinely. I stopped in the doorway longer than I should have. One of the children noticed me first. Then Olivia looked up. Her green eyes met mine for a brief second. I expected recognition. Most people recognized me immediately. She did not. She smiled politely, the same way she would have smiled at a delivery driver or a parent arriving early for pickup. Then she returned her attention to the children. It was such a small thing, such an ordinary thing. Yet something shifted inside me. For the first time in years, someone had looked at Ethan Blackwell and seen only another person walking through a doorway. I should have left after 20 minutes. Instead, I stayed. I told myself I stayed because leaving immediately would have seemed rude. That was the explanation I used when my assistant called twice asking why I had missed a conference call. It was the excuse I repeated when I found myself accepting a paper cup of coffee from one of the volunteers and sitting in a child-sized chair near the back of the classroom. The truth was simpler. I was curious about Olivia Carter. For the next hour, I watched her move through the room with a kind of effortless patience that felt completely foreign to me. She remembered every child's name. She listened to stories that wandered in 6 different directions before reaching a point. She celebrated messy paintings as if they belonged in museums. Nobody was competing. Nobody was negotiating. Nobody was trying to gain an advantage. The entire room operated on a set of values I barely recognized anymore. At some point, Olivia walked over carrying a stack of paper and placed one in front of me. "You are sitting in an art class," she said with a small smile. "That means you have to participate." I glanced at the blank page. I think the children deserve better than my artistic abilities. A few of the kids overheard and immediately disagreed. One little boy pushed a box of markers toward me. Another informed me that stick figures were acceptable. Olivia laughed softly. "See? The audience has spoken." I cannot explain why I picked up a marker. I had billion-dollar contracts waiting for my signature. Yet somehow I spent the next 15 minutes drawing a terrible skyline, while 7-year-olds offered surprisingly brutal criticism. Olivia joined the conversation, pretending to evaluate my work with professional seriousness. "The buildings look nervous," she said. "Buildings cannot look nervous." "These do." The kids agreed with her. Unanimously. It was the first time I had laughed in weeks. Maybe months. The sound surprised me almost as much as it surprised everyone else. After the class ended, parents arrived to collect their children. The room slowly emptied. Volunteers stacked supplies and cleaned tables. I checked my watch and realized nearly 3 hours had passed. Olivia was wiping paint from a table when I walked over. "Thank you," I said. She looked confused. "For what?" "For letting me stay." She shrugged. "You looked like you needed a break." The answer caught me off guard. Most people assumed I enjoyed my life. They saw private planes, penthouses, and magazine covers. Nobody ever suggested I looked tired. Olivia did. Not judgmentally. Not dramatically. She simply noticed. "Is it that obvious?" I asked. She studied me for a second. "You have the look." The look. The one people get when they spend so much time chasing the next thing that they forget to enjoy the thing they already have. I should have been offended. Instead, I found myself smiling. "And what exactly do you think I am chasing?" Olivia grabbed her bag and headed toward the door. "I have no idea," she said. "I just hope it is worth it." Then she walked away. I stood there longer than necessary watching the empty hallway. Because for the first time in years, someone had asked me a question I could not answer. And that bothered me far more than it should have. I should have forgotten about Olivia Carter after that day. People moved in and out of my world constantly. Politicians, investors, executives. Entire companies appeared on my calendar and disappeared a few months later. That was how my life worked. Yet 3 days after visiting the community center, I found myself staring at a photograph from the event sitting on my desk. The marketing team had sent over dozens of images for approval. Most showed smiling children holding paintings. A few captured me speaking with volunteers. One photograph stopped me. Olivia was standing in the background helping a little girl clean blue paint from her hands. She was not looking at the camera. She had no idea the picture existed. Somehow it felt more real than every professionally staged image in the folder. I closed the file and tried to focus on work. It did not help. The following week brought another round of meetings. Another acquisition. Another endless stream of presentations filled with charts predicting growth over the next decade. Everyone around the conference table seemed energized. I felt exhausted. Halfway through a discussion about market expansion, my brother Victor interrupted with one of his usual polished observations. The board loved Victor. Investors loved Victor. He always knew exactly what people wanted to hear. "We need to stay aggressive," he said confidently. "Momentum is everything." Heads nodded around the room. I nodded too. Yet all I could think about was a question Olivia had asked without actually asking it. Was any of this worth it? The thought irritated me. By Friday afternoon, I made a decision that surprised even me. I cleared an hour from my schedule and returned to Brooklyn. This time I did not bring photographers. I did not bring executives. I did not even tell my assistant where I was going. The community center looked exactly the same. Children ran through the halls. Volunteers carried supplies between rooms. Life moved at a pace completely disconnected from Manhattan boardrooms. When I stepped into the art classroom, Olivia looked up from a table covered in colored paper. "You came back," she said. Her tone carried genuine surprise. "You sound disappointed." "No, just surprised." She crossed her arms. "Most important people visit once, take their pictures, and disappear." I laughed quietly. "And you assumed that was me?" I assumed the expensive suit was a clue. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she smiled. Not the polite smile from our first meeting. A real one. Warm. Unforced. Dangerous in a way no business negotiation had ever been. We spent the next hour helping children build cardboard cities. Mine collapsed twice. A 9-year-old informed me that I lacked engineering skills. Olivia found that far more amusing than she should have. The strange thing was that I did not mind. For years, people had treated me carefully. They measured every word. They calculated every reaction. Around Olivia, none of that existed. She challenged me, teased me, ignored my status completely. As the afternoon ended, we walked outside together. The sun hung low above the Brooklyn rooftops, painting the streets gold. Olivia adjusted the strap of her bag and glanced toward me. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course." "What does Ethan Blackwell do when nobody is watching?" I opened my mouth, then stopped. Because for the second time since meeting her, I realized I did not know the answer. The question followed me for days. What does Ethan Blackwell do when nobody is watching? I heard it during meetings. I heard it while reviewing contracts. I heard it late at night, while standing alone in a penthouse overlooking the city. The problem was not that Olivia had asked it. The problem was that I could not answer it. My entire life had been built around performance. Investors watched. Employees watched. Competitors watched. Every decision became a headline or a quarterly report. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being a person and became a brand. 2 weeks later, I found myself sitting across from Olivia in a small coffee shop 3 blocks from the community center. The place smelled like roasted beans and cinnamon. Rain tapped softly against the windows. People worked on laptops. A college student studied near the counter. Nobody paid attention to me. It was strangely refreshing. Olivia wrapped both hands around a mug of tea and watched me carefully. "You look less stressed today," she said. "That is because I ignored 12 emails before coming here." She laughed. "That sounds unhealthy. You have no idea." Her smile faded into curiosity. "Why do you work so hard?" It was such a simple question. Yet nobody had asked it in years. People usually asked about strategy, revenue, expansion. Nobody asked why. I stared at the rain sliding down the glass. Because if I stopped moving, I would have to think. Olivia did not respond immediately. She never rushed to fill silence. That was another thing I liked about her. She listened, really listened. "And what are you afraid of thinking about?" she finally asked. I looked at her. For a moment, I considered giving the polished answer, the safe answer. Instead, I surprised myself. That none of it means anything. The words hung between us. Honest, uncomfortable, real. Olivia nodded slowly, as if she understood more than I intended to reveal. I do not think that is what you are afraid of, she said. I think you are afraid it means everything. I frowned. What does that mean? If your work becomes your entire identity, then every success feels temporary and every failure feels personal. I sat back in my chair. It was unsettling how accurately she could see through me. The conversation drifted to easier subjects after that. Books, music, childhood memories. Hours passed without either of us noticing. When we finally stepped outside, evening lights reflected off the wet pavement. The city felt softer somehow, less aggressive. Olivia glanced at her watch and sighed. I should go. For reasons I could not fully explain, I did not want the night to end. Dinner tomorrow? The question escaped before I could overthink it. She blinked, surprised, then smiled. Is that a business meeting? Definitely not. Good. A small laugh escaped her. Then yes. She turned and started walking toward the subway entrance. Halfway there, she looked back over her shoulder. Try ignoring 13 emails tomorrow. Then she disappeared into the crowd. I stood there smiling like an idiot beneath the glow of a streetlight. And for the first time in a very long time, I was looking forward to tomorrow more than I was looking forward to success. The problem with happiness is that people notice when it changes you. I did not see it at first. Olivia did. My assistant did. Even the barista at the coffee shop where Olivia and I started meeting every Thursday afternoon noticed. Apparently, I smiled more. I arrived on time less often. I stopped checking my phone every 30 seconds. Small things. Harmless things. At least that was what I thought. The board did not see them as harmless. Neither did Victor. It started during a strategy meeting on a Monday morning. 20 executives sat around a polished conference table overlooking Midtown Manhattan. A merger proposal worth nearly $8 billion sat in front of every seat. Months of negotiations. Years of projected growth. The kind of deal that usually excited me. Yet as analysts discussed forecasts and market share, my attention drifted toward a drawing folded inside my notebook. One of the children from the community center had given it to me the previous week. A poorly drawn superhero wearing a business suit. The caption underneath read, "Ethan saves meetings." I smiled despite myself. Victor noticed immediately. He always noticed everything. After the meeting ended, he followed me into my office. The glass door clicked shut behind him. "You seem distracted lately," he said. His tone sounded casual. It never was. I walked toward the windows overlooking the city. "Busy." Victor laughed softly. "You have always been busy." Silence settled between us, the kind that carried more weight than words. Finally, he spoke again. "The board is concerned." I turned. "Concerned about what?" "Your priorities." There it was. Direct and precise. Victor excelled at delivering uncomfortable truths wrapped in polished language. "The merger requires complete focus," he continued. "Investors expect certainty." I folded my arms. "They have certainty, do they?" His eyes narrowed slightly. "Because lately you have been leaving early, declining dinners, missing opportunities to strengthen relationships." I knew exactly what he meant. Olivia. He just did not know her name yet. My personal life is not a board matter. Victor smiled. It was the same smile he used during negotiations right before gaining leverage. Everything becomes a board matter when billions of dollars are involved. After he left, I stood alone in the office staring at the skyline. For years, Victor and I had wanted the same thing. Growth, expansion, control. Somewhere along the way, our paths had quietly separated. Later that evening, I met Olivia at a small bookstore near Brooklyn Heights. Rain drummed softly against the windows while customers wandered between shelves. The smell of paper and coffee filled the air. She immediately noticed something was wrong. "Rough day?" she asked. I nodded. "Something like that." Olivia studied me for a moment before handing me a novel from a display table. "Then you need this." I looked at the cover. "What is it about?" She smiled. "A man who spends his whole life chasing success before realizing he forgot to build a life worth sharing." I stared at her, then at the book, then back at her. "You planned that, did not you?" Her laugh echoed through the quiet store. Warm, genuine, completely unaware that miles away, in a glass tower above Manhattan, my brother had already begun paying closer attention to the one thing I was no longer willing to lose. Over the next few months, my life split into two completely different worlds. In Manhattan, I was still Ethan Blackwell, Chief Executive Officer, board chairman, the man expected to deliver another record-breaking year. In Brooklyn, I was simply Ethan, the guy who helped carry art supplies. The guy who occasionally lost arguments to 10-year-olds about the best superhero. The guy who looked forward to seeing Olivia more than he looked forward to closing multi-million-dollar deals. That should have been my first warning. The problem was that I had never been happier. Autumn arrived slowly. Leaves turned gold across the city. The air grew cooler. Olivia and I spent weekends exploring neighborhoods I had ignored for years despite living in New York my entire adult life. We walked through street fairs, visited small bookstores, ate food from places without reservations or celebrity chefs. Every experience felt strangely new. One Saturday afternoon, we sat on a bench overlooking the Hudson River. Families passed by with strollers. Dogs chased tennis balls across the grass. The skyline shimmered in the distance. Olivia leaned back and closed her eyes toward the sun. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "You always do." She smiled. "Fair point." Then her expression grew serious. "Why do people seem nervous around you?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "The waiter yesterday. The hotel manager last week. Even some people at the charity event." She opened her eyes and looked at me. "They act like they are being evaluated." I laughed quietly. Occupational hazard. That is not an answer. She was right. It was not. I stared toward the river. The water reflected sunlight in scattered flashes. Most of my life has been spent making decisions that affect other people. Olivia waited. And eventually people stopped seeing you as a person. The words surprised me. They were true, but I had never said them aloud. Olivia looked thoughtful. "Maybe that is why you like being here. Here. Places where nobody cares what your job title is." I wanted to tell her she was wrong. Instead, I realized she was absolutely right. Across the city, however, a very different conversation was taking place. Victor had begun attending more board dinners, more private meetings, more investor events. At first, I barely noticed. He always enjoyed politics more than I did. But gradually, small comments started reaching me. Questions about succession. Questions about leadership focus. Questions about whether I was still committed to aggressive expansion. Nothing direct. Nothing obvious. Just enough to create doubt. One evening, my assistant placed a folder on my desk. Several board members requested updates on the merger timeline, she said carefully. Again, I opened the folder. The same merger. The same proposal. The same deal everyone expected me to finalize before the end of the year. For months, I had delayed the decision. Not because it was a bad deal. Because accepting it would consume the next several years of my life. Every weekend. Every holiday. Every piece of freedom I had slowly begun rediscovering. That night, I met Olivia for dinner. Halfway through the meal, she noticed I was distracted. Something happened. It was not a question. I nodded. "I need to make a choice." Olivia studied me carefully. About work? About what kind of life I want. Silence settled between us. Then she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Just once. Simple. Gentle. Enough to steady the storm in my head. What neither of us knew was that somewhere else in the city, Victor was already counting on exactly which choice I would make. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock on a cold Thursday morning. By 8:30, the conference room was already full. Executives reviewed reports. Attorneys organized documents. Assistants moved quietly between seats carrying coffee and updated projections. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan stretched beneath a gray winter sky. Normally, I would have felt energized walking into a room like that. That morning, I felt something else. Clarity. For weeks, I had wrestled with a decision everyone else seemed to have already made for me. The merger promised growth, more influence, more wealth, more control. It also promised years of sacrifice, years spent chasing numbers instead of living. When the presentation ended, every eye in the room turned toward me. Victor sat near the far end of the table, calm, confident, waiting. The lead advisor summarized the final recommendation. Approve the merger. Move forward immediately. Secure the future of the company. It sounded logical, responsible, predictable. I stood slowly and walked toward the windows. The city below looked exactly the same as it had the day before. Yet everything felt different. "We are not proceeding," I said. Silence hit the room instantly. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Several people actually glanced at one another as if they had misheard me. Finally, one board member cleared his throat. "Excuse me." I turned back toward the table. The merger is canceled. Questions erupted immediately. Concerns, objections, calculations, numbers, risks. For years, those arguments would have controlled me. Not anymore. I listened patiently until the room quieted again. Blackwell Holdings was built to create value, I said, not to consume every aspect of our lives. This deal increases profits. It does not improve the company. It does not improve our people. And it certainly does not improve the lives we are supposed to be building. Several executives looked stunned. Others looked disappointed. Victor looked interested. That worried me more than anger would have. After the meeting ended, he caught up with me outside my office. This is about her. His voice was calm. Too calm. I stopped walking. You have been investigating my personal life. He smiled faintly. You are the chief executive officer of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. People investigate everything. My jaw tightened. Leave Olivia out of this. For the first time, Victor's expression shifted. Barely. Just enough for me to notice. That sounds serious. I did not answer. I walked away before the conversation could go further. That evening, I found Olivia at the community center helping children prepare decorations for a winter fundraiser. Construction paper covered every table. Laughter echoed through the room. Life. Real life. The kind no board meeting could ever measure. When the children finally left, we stayed behind cleaning supplies and stacking chairs. Olivia noticed my mood immediately. You did it. I looked at her. How do you know? She smiled softly. Because you look relieved. The truth hit me then. She was right. For the first time in years, I felt lighter. Like I had finally chosen something for myself instead of for shareholders, analysts, or headlines. Olivia stepped closer and looked up at me. Are you happy? She asked. I thought about the boardroom. The merger. The expectations I had just rejected. Then I looked at her. Yes, I said honestly. I think I finally am. What I did not know was that across the city, Victor was sitting alone in his office reviewing reports, making calls, and quietly setting a plan into motion. Because the moment I chose the life I wanted, he decided it was time to take everything else. The first sign appeared on a Tuesday morning. I was halfway through a meeting when my phone began vibrating nonstop across the conference table. Messages, emails, news alerts. At first, I ignored them. By the 10th notification, even I could not pretend it was normal. When the meeting ended, my assistant entered the room with a look I had never seen on her face before. Concern. Real concern. You need to see this. She handed me a tablet. A financial publication had released an article questioning several strategic decisions made by Blackwell Holdings over the previous year. On its own, the article was manageable. The problem was that 3 more appeared before lunch. Then 5 more. By evening, television analysts were debating whether the company had lost direction under my leadership. The timing felt too precise, too coordinated. Somebody was feeding information to the media. Somebody wanted uncertainty. The next few weeks became a blur of damage control. Investors demanded explanations. Board members requested emergency sessions. Market confidence weakened. Every day brought another rumor. Another anonymous source. Another carefully timed story designed to create doubt. Through it all, Victor remained calm. Supportive. Helpful. Almost excessively helpful. That should have told me everything. Instead, I focused on protecting the company. One night, long after most employees had gone home, I sat alone in my office staring at a skyline that suddenly felt colder. My phone rang. Olivia. Just hearing her voice eased some of the pressure building inside my chest. You sound tired, she said immediately. I laughed softly. Apparently, I am becoming predictable. Only to people who care about you. The silence that followed hurt more than I expected, because I realized how much I needed her. Not her advice. Not her reassurance. Her presence. The simple fact that she existed somewhere beyond boardrooms and headlines. We met the following evening at our favorite coffee shop. Snow drifted past the windows outside. The city seemed quieter beneath the white blanket covering sidewalks and rooftops. Olivia listened while I explained what was happening. She never interrupted, never offered easy answers. When I finally finished, she reached for her tea and stared into the steam rising from the cup. Do you trust your brother? The question caught me off guard. Victor. She nodded. I considered the answer carefully. We had spent years building the company together. Years chasing the same goals. Yet recently something had changed. Something I could not quite define. I admitted. Olivia lowered her eyes. Then pay attention. That was all she said. No accusations. No theories. Just a warning delivered with quiet sincerity. 3 days later, the board called for a special vote regarding executive leadership. I stood at the head of the conference room, watching directors file into their seats. Faces I had known for years suddenly felt unfamiliar. Across the table, Victor met my gaze and offered a polite smile. The kind people give before closing a door. And for the first time, I realized the attack against the company had never been about the company at all. It had always been about me. The vote lasted less than 15 minutes. 15 years of work reduced to a quarter of an hour. I sat at the head of the conference table while directors cast their decisions one by one. Some could not meet my eyes. Others looked relieved. A few appeared genuinely regretful. None of it changed the outcome. When the final count was announced, the room fell silent. My position as chief executive officer was terminated effective immediately. Victor would assume leadership responsibilities until further notice. Just like that. No dramatic speeches. No shouting. No celebration. Only silence. The kind that follows something important dying. I gathered my papers slowly. Nobody stopped me. Nobody knew what to say. As I walked toward the door, Victor stood. "Ethan." I paused. For a moment, I thought he might apologize. Explain. Pretend this had been necessary. Instead, he simply extended his hand. A professional gesture. Cold. Polished. Final. I looked at it for a second before walking past him without a word. Outside, snow drifted across the city in soft white sheets. Reporters waited near the entrance. Questions followed me down the steps. Cameras flashed. Speculation exploded online within minutes. By sunset, every financial network in America was discussing my fall. Yet none of it hurt as much as the emptiness waiting for me when I reached home. I called Olivia immediately. No answer. I left a message. Then another. Then a third. Nothing. At first, I assumed she was busy. Teaching. Volunteering. Living her life. By midnight, worry began replacing logic. The next morning, I drove to the community center. The classroom was empty. A volunteer recognized me and offered a sympathetic smile. "Olivia is not here." My stomach tightened. "Do you know where she is?" The woman hesitated. "She resigned yesterday." The words hit harder than losing the company. "Resign?" She nodded. "She said an opportunity came up. She left pretty quickly." I stared at the empty room. The colorful artwork still covered the walls. Children's drawings still hung from bulletin boards. Everything looked the same, except she was gone. I spent the next week searching for answers. Her phone had been disconnected. Her apartment lease had ended. Friends knew very little, or claimed they did. Every trail disappeared almost immediately. It made no sense. Olivia was not the kind of person who vanished without explanation. Then, 10 days later, I found the letter. It arrived in a plain envelope with no return address. My hands shook before I even opened it. Inside was a single page. Her handwriting. I recognized it instantly. "Ethan, if you are reading this, please do not look for me. What happened to you is already costing too much. People are asking questions. They are looking for someone to blame. I cannot become another problem you have to carry. You once told me that real courage means making difficult choices. This is mine. You deserve the chance to rebuild your life without worrying about me. Please believe that leaving is not the same as forgetting. Some people change your life forever. You changed mine." For a long time, I sat alone holding that letter. Snow tapped softly against the windows. The city moved outside exactly as it always had. But for the first time in my life, I had lost something no amount of money could replace. And unlike the company, there was no board vote that could bring her back. People think losing everything happens in a single moment. It does not. The headlines arrive first. Then the phone stops ringing. Invitations disappear. Doors that once opened automatically remain closed. One loss becomes another until eventually you wake up and realize an entire version of your life has quietly vanished. The first year after leaving Blackwell Holdings felt like walking through fog. I sold the penthouse. I stepped away from interviews. I ignored every opportunity to fight my way back into the spotlight. Analysts called it a mistake. Former colleagues called it surrender. Maybe they were right. At the time, I did not care. Success had cost me the one person I wanted to share it with. Winning no longer felt important. I moved into a smaller apartment on the Upper West Side. Nothing extravagant. Nothing designed to impress anyone. The building overlooked a public park where parents pushed strollers and children chased pigeons across walking paths. Every morning, I sat near the window with coffee and watched ordinary life unfold. Strange how something so simple had once felt impossible. Months turned into years. Gradually, the noise faded. The anger faded too. What remained was perspective. I began volunteering at community programs across the city. At first, it was simply a way to stay busy. Then it became something more. I helped fund after-school initiatives, scholarship programs, arts education projects, the kinds of causes I would have written checks to before without ever meeting the people involved. Now I knew their names, their stories, their struggles. One Saturday afternoon, I found myself standing inside a recreation center helping a group of teenagers prepare presentations for a scholarship competition. The room smelled like pizza and dry erase markers. Laughter echoed from the gym down the hall. A young boy approached, carrying a poster board nearly as tall as he was. "Mr. Blackwell, can you help me with this?" I looked at the crooked charts and handwritten notes covering the page. Absolutely. We spent the next 30 minutes fixing labels and straightening sections. When we finished, he grinned proudly. "You are really good at this." I laughed. "Trust me, nobody has ever said that before." The boy frowned. Then they were wrong. Simple words. Honest words. The kind children offer without realizing how much they matter. That night, walking home through the city, I thought about Olivia. I still thought about her more often than I admitted. Some memories faded with time. She never did. Certain places still reminded me of her. A bookstore window. A coffee shop. The sound of laughter drifting from an art classroom. The pain had changed over the years. Softer now. Less like a wound. More like an echo. Then, one rainy evening nearly 3 years after she disappeared, my phone rang. The caller ID displayed a name I had not seen in a very long time. Rachel Monroe, one of the former board members. We exchanged brief greetings before she got to the point. "Ethan," she said carefully, "there are things you need to know about Victor." I stopped walking. Rain tapped against my umbrella. Traffic hissed across wet pavement. Something in her voice made every instinct sharpen immediately. "What kind of things?" Silence lingered for a second. Then she answered, "The kind that change everything you think happened." The meeting with Rachel took place the following afternoon in a quiet restaurant overlooking Central Park. Rain streaked the windows. The lunch crowd spoke in low voices around us. Everything looked ordinary. What she told me was not. Rachel slid a folder across the table and folded her hands. "Victor started building support against you long before the merger debate." I stared at the documents inside. Emails, internal memos, meeting notes, years of carefully coordinated influence. None of it was illegal. All of it was deliberate. My stomach tightened as page after page revealed the same pattern. Victor had been positioning himself as an alternative leader for years. Every disagreement, every delayed project, every mistake had been quietly cataloged and amplified. "Why are you showing me this now?" I asked. Rachel looked down for a moment. "Because some of us finally realized what happened." The words hung between us. Heavy, uncomfortable. True. For 3 years I had blamed myself for everything. The company, the board, the collapse of my career. Now I was looking at proof that the outcome had been engineered long before the final vote. "There is more," Rachel said quietly. She pulled out a second envelope. My pulse quickened immediately. "What is it?" Her expression softened. "Information about Olivia." For a second, the entire restaurant seemed to disappear. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were copies of private communications between consultants hired by Blackwell Holdings and several media firms. My eyes moved across the pages, then stopped, then moved again because I could not believe what I was reading. Olivia had become a target. Not publicly, not directly, but enough rumors had been circulated to make her life increasingly difficult. Reporters asking questions, strangers appearing near the community center, online speculation linking her to decisions she had never influenced. The pressure had not been accidental. It had been created. My chest felt tight. She left because of this. Rachel nodded slowly. "I think she believed staying would hurt you more." I closed my eyes. 3 years. 3 years believing she had chosen to walk away. 3 years carrying resentment toward myself and confusion toward her. All while she had been protecting me the only way she knew how. The realization hurt almost as much as losing her in the first place. "There is one last thing," Rachel said. "Several board members want you back." I laughed softly. Not because it was funny, because it felt absurd. 3 years earlier, I would have wanted nothing more. The company had been my identity. my purpose, my entire world. Now the idea felt strangely distant. Victor's position is weakening, Rachel continued. If you move quickly, there is a real path back. Outside the window, people crossed the park carrying umbrellas against the rain. Ordinary lives. Ordinary moments. The kind I had spent years learning to appreciate. I thought about the company, the power, the influence, everything I had once sacrificed myself to protect. Then I thought about Olivia, about her letter, about the years we had lost. No, I said quietly. Rachel blinked. No, I shook my head. If I have learned anything, it is that some things matter more than winning. For the first time since sitting down, I smiled. A real smile. The kind I had not worn in years. Because while everyone else was focused on restoring my past, I had already made a different decision. I was going to find Olivia. Finding Olivia took less time than I expected and far longer than I wanted. 3 years of searching could not locate her. 3 days with the right information changed everything. Rachel connected me with someone who had quietly stayed in touch with a former volunteer from the community center. One phone call became another. One lead became an address. On a cool spring morning, I found myself driving north through a small coastal town in Maine. The road curved between rows of pine trees and weathered homes. Fishing boats rocked gently in the harbor. The air smelled like salt water and fresh rain. It felt 1,000 miles away from Manhattan, even though it was only a few hours. I parked across from a modest brick building with a hand-painted sign above the entrance. Community Arts Center. Children's laughter drifted through an open window. My heart pounded harder with every step. It was ridiculous. I had negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat. Yet walking toward that door felt harder than any boardroom battle I had ever faced. Through the glass, I saw her. Olivia stood beside a table covered in paintbrushes helping a little girl finish a watercolor painting. 3 years disappeared instantly. She looked almost exactly the same. Maybe a little older. A little wiser. Still completely herself. The room tilted slightly as every memory came rushing back at once. She glanced toward the entrance. Our eyes met. Everything stopped. For a second, neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. The children kept laughing. The world kept turning. But for me, time stood still. Olivia slowly handed the paintbrush to another volunteer and walked toward the door. When she stepped outside, the ocean breeze lifted strands of her hair. We stood there facing each other. 2 people separated by 3 years of silence and 1,000 unspoken questions. You found me, she said softly. I smiled. You never made it easy. A small laugh escaped her. The sound hit me harder than I expected. I had missed that laugh. More than I realized. For a moment, neither of us knew what to say next. Then I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the letter she had written years ago. The edges were worn from being folded and unfolded countless times. I kept it, I said. Olivia lowered her eyes. Ethan. I shook my head gently. No. This time let me talk. She looked up. I took a slow breath. For years, I thought I lost everything because I made the wrong choice. I thought choosing you had cost me my company, my career, my future. My voice softened. Then I realized something. Tears glimmered in her eyes. What? I smiled. Not sadly. Not bitterly. Gratefully. Choosing you was the only thing I ever got right. Silence followed. Beautiful silence. The kind that does not need filling. Olivia wiped at the corner of one eye and laughed through the tears. You always did take too long to figure things out. That is fair. Another laugh. This time we shared it. Somewhere behind us, a church bell echoed across the harbor. The afternoon sun broke through the clouds and painted the water gold. Olivia stepped closer. Not because she had to, because she wanted to. And for the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. The company was gone. The title was gone. The empire was gone. Yet standing there beside the woman I loved, none of those things felt important anymore. Power had built my success. Loss had taught me humility. But love had given me something far more valuable. A life worth living. And as I looked into Olivia's eyes, I finally understood a truth that no balance sheet could ever measure. Sometimes losing everything is exactly what allows you to find what matters most.